Everyone, I am proud to actually in one of those random associations again, a person tells another person. I'm here with Vikas Shah, Thought Economics, right?
Hi there.
And a
Yeah.
whole host of other really cool things. And so today, Vikas, what we wanted to do is talk about you a little bit, talk about what you're doing.
Mhm.
And, as I ask everybody, we're going to start with community and what community means.
Yeah.
So why not provide a little bit of introduction to yourself and then we can kind of dive right in.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. So, I'm Vikas, and I've got one of those odd lives. You know how everyone on Twitter now, instead of saying I am a this, they have the I am a this, this, and this. So, my this, and this is business, teaching, and philanthropy. So, I own a bunch of businesses here in the UK, and we invest in startups and scale ups around the world. I also teach at a couple of universities as a professor of entrepreneurship on MBA programs. And through our own foundation and working with other donors, we work with charities in the UK and internationally, mainly around peace building and poverty alleviation.
Well,
and I have two cats.
Oh, the two cats sets the table. I was joking with Naomi because we both know Naomi Timberley, that we have cats that seem to involve themselves in every aspect of our lives, right?
They do, and now that I'm back at the office post lockdown, I kind of miss them because normally like Sam would be here, so just staring at you to make sure everything's going okay.
That's all right. I always like it when they stop, pause, turn around, and all you have is cat butt, which happens. So. Clark, how did you get into let's say the entrepreneurial side of what you do? I mean, that's everybody has an interesting story about that. Like, how did you end up in that place?
So I think like a lot of people that end up in there, it was kind of largely by accident, right? So I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be an airline pilot. That was the dream. But becoming a pilot is really expensive. So when I was a lot younger. I basically started doing kind of freelance web design work, basically to pay for flying lessons, right? Yeah. But then the business started doing this, and I realized sometimes how much pilots earn, so that dream kind of went this way, and it just opened up a whole new area of life that I actually never knew I'd be interested in, and that's how I ended up not having a real job ever.
Real job is what you make of it, right? I think I always like to make the definition, the distinction clear between a career and a job. A job is something you do, a career is something that you want to do, right? Yeah. It's that's that overall trajectory in life. So entrepreneurship to philanthropy, that's also kind of, sometimes we see those at odds with each other at certain points. Yeah. So how did that come about?
I think it's a shame sometimes that they are seen at odds, though I totally acknowledge that often they are. And so for me, it was so in the UK and Europe, philanthropy tends to be something you do in your will when you die or when you're retired and have nothing else to do, and that's a real shame. So my first business ended up doing a lot of work in the US. So at quite an early stage of my career, I was out on the West Coast and East Coast, meeting lots of businesses there. And I just loved the fact that in the US, a lot of these other entrepreneurs who were still young, still on their journey, were really actively involved in nonprofits. They were giving their time, their money, their resources, and it just seemed like the right thing to do, because you're only here by accident. You're only where you are in life by accident. It could have been easily that circumstances were very different. So I kind of at a very early stage decided that the right and proper thing to do, if you've been lucky enough to achieve some success, is to just do as much as you can to, leave a good footprint on the world.
Right. Well, that's a great mindset to have. I think again, the difficulty here is everybody gets tossed into this accumulate wealth as much as possible, right? Because you're setting yourself up for the rest of your life. And I actually had the pleasure of talking to Esther, so Carol Rossborough and the folks that are working over there. And one of the emphases and things that she found was that people, where she expected people to be giving, in the later stages, if you will, actually was inverted. A lot of folks were just looking for that opportunity to give within the excess of what they may or may not have, if it's a $10 here or, $50 or
exactly
something that's able to give in there. I think we always look for the grandized moment of I'm Warren Buffett and I can toss down $10 billion or Bill Gates or whatever. But it really, start small. It never has to be these large deposits of cash
Correct.
to things. So,
And it's also, it's not just cash, it's network, right? It's when you are, when you're at the kind of peak point in your career, you've got that network around you of other businesses, of other individuals. It might be that you're well known for a particular period of time, and that all can be leveraged to, raise awareness where necessary, or frankly, to bring in the money for big projects where needed too. And it's like I said, for every one person in the world that does well, there's thousands and thousands and thousands who never get the same opportunity, or just don't have an economic system around them that would allow them to do it. So I think, to coin a kind of odd metaphor, if you're at a dinner party and you're the only person eating, you'd feel bad. But that's the reality of how economics works.
yeah.
And we have to see it like that.
Well, that's I can picture that metaphor, and it's apropos, I suppose, in that. So, bringing us to what I usually ask everybody, so within philanthropy, within every, your context, how do you view community? What is it realized to you?
It's strange, isn't it? Because when you say community, there's often this kind of knee jerk to have this warm, fuzzy feeling where you're thinking about, the kind of Sunday parade in your local village, or the small shop, or that local grocer that you've always been to. But community is just kind of that collection of individuals and resources that you participate in and who have a stake in your life. And I think, because we are all mobile and connected, I think that's probably the only definition we can have, because we exist in many communities now as opposed to just one. And even if we go back a century, we typically had a community. It will have been the other factory workers you lived and worked with. That was basically it. Yeah. Or the landowner to whom you were in servitude. There's a community. But now we have a stake in lots of people's lives, and they have a stake in ours, and that is our community.
Well, I like that. I'm going to have to use that at some point. When you look at community, and you, I think you rightly called it out and said, it used to be very nuclear, right? It used to be, this is who, where I exist, my little bubble, so to speak. In this day and age where everything has changed, right? We now are away from an office. Most of I know you're in an office today, which I kind of miss my office, to be honest. Where we have this kind of diaspora, if you will, away from offices, away from social gatherings, really, in the aspects of safety and obviously good faith towards each other. Do you see that technology is enabling different types of community now, or do you see a kind of a negative aspect of that?
I think that there's, we're still quite early insofar as humanity's relationship to social media, and by that I mean fundamentally anything that can allow you to broadcast and receive simultaneously. That's really new, and we didn't really have anything like that before, apart from talking to each other. And so I think people are still figuring out, what does that mean? And we saw at the beginning of lockdown, for a lot of people who don't use it day to day, there was a huge novelty, and everyone was doing Zoom quizzes and all sorts of things, and it all got kind of tired really quickly. And what you ended up with is this kind of like the hype cycle of, oh my God, what can we do with this technology? And then just the reality of, what am I going to say to someone? I've just been in lockdown another week. I haven't got any news for you. And it starts to almost become burdensome, where as we all do as human beings, we end up loading ourselves with more and more expectations of having to post this, or having to jump on the friend's Zoom call or whatever. So I think there's a balance where, in the right situations, so it might be that you have, a hobby or interest or something, and you're able to find people that share that. Brilliant. It might be that you're quite an isolated individual and it's your only way to really reach out to friends and family. Great. But I do think that it also opens up the opportunity, for it to become a substitute for real human interaction. And we know from all the studies that we need real world human interaction for our mental well-being. But it can also become a substitute for actually getting out there in the world and moving forward, because even in the office environment, I'm a massive advocate for there to be a balance between working at home, working in the office. But there's so much that happens from that collision of being around people. So I think we are still, as a society, getting used to the role of these technologies in our lives. And the pandemic's been a really interesting test of this. And it's been a really interesting kind of experiment in what these technologies mean. And I think it will take a few years for us to really adapt into a flow with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're seeing that through education, right? That's a
Mm.
huge part with the kids going back to school right now, having to relearn socialization in the context of I can't just reach out and go to a playground, or I can't just reach out and, pass a note in class anymore. It's now chat through Zoom or Google Meet or something along that line. In the same way
Yeah.
as adults, I think you called it out very, very specifically. It's almost this I talked way back at the beginning of this whole journey that I'm on about being fake fine. There's a song by a guy named Robert Grace about fake fine. You present this kind of mask to the world. And Zoom allows you to do that a lot, or these kind of media allow you to do that. I can present to the world in social media one thing while I am truly existing on a different level of, personhood, or, call it pathology or whatever it ends up being, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
that
we kind of forget we're human, right? Like, it's really easy to think of ourselves as these really super advanced creatures that can exist in these digital domains, but we're animals, right? And that means that actually, after billions of years of evolution, means that there are certain things wired into us that mean that we need to be together. We need to be in the same room. We need to touch each other and hug, and there's certain things that we need to do, not because of how I feel or how you feel, but it's just the way that we as a species are hardwired. And removing ourselves from those kind of interactions does have consequences. And we're already seeing that, through several organizations I'm involved in. We're already seeing a massive increase in, mental health challenges and all of those kind of, real pathologies that occur from a lack of human contact.
So talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you're involved in on side here. I mean, I know in pre-brief we talked a little bit about some of these conflict areas and and other things, but go into that a little bit for me.
So I've always looked at it with a view of, rather than it being for me cause based. So it's not it's not that I have gone through this experience and therefore I want to support this charity or this cause. It's always been more, where can I add value? Where can I bring my network or capital or whatever it is to add value? And it seems to have been that over the years, that's kind of fallen into poverty alleviation. So we work with charities involved in homelessness and with marginalized people, and with kind of conflict and peace building, with international communities, and with things involving sustainable development. So it might be providing microfinance to young people to build a project somewhere, or even providing entrepreneurship training. So there's definitely sort of some very distinct areas. And like I said, I think the thing that I would always advise people is, don't get hung up on a cause just because you might feel passionate about it. Try and really explore what are different organizations doing, understand how the sector works, where can you add value, because that's the rewarding bit.
And part of that's discomfort should spur you to action, right? I was talking to a couple of folks over this past week. It's Tuesday now, so within the past week, about we have that idea of the pleasure principle, right? Freudian, very, very Freudian in nature. We gravitate towards things that bring us pleasure, and we run away from things that cause us pain. But even in that, there's a true axiom to be talked about. That discomfort spurs us to action. It should spur us towards doing things for others, whether it be in an altruistic sense or in some way that comforts and provides emotional support or relief to us. So I think it's very apropos what you're saying. It's not just look at what makes you always feel good, but look at the things that cause discomfort. Look at the things that kind of give you that edge and grit your teeth a little bit, because homelessness, for example, affects us all in a way, shape, or form. Our communities, whether it be geographic or social or however it ends up being shaped, affects us all. From a very pure capitalist sense, it drags down aspects of the economy, but in a sociological sense, it also shows us the depravity of humankind. What led us to this point? What can we do to engender better things for the folks that are around us, and how do we care for our own?
And we don't really have society in the same way that we always have. There was what we now call philanthropy and in many ways charity was just how communities worked before. It was the case that communities had a sense of bonding, and you did look after people in your community if they fell on hard times, and and there was a sense of being in this together. And we feel like that because we can go to the Park Slope Cooperative and get our, locally sourced avocado or whatever from someone that we know. But that's kind of a fake. That's not really a community. That's just a group of people with a shared interest. Would you give that person your sofa or your couch to sleep on if they fell on hard times? Community resilience is very different. And part of the reason is that if you think about kind of the number of people along this axis and income on this axis, whereas society used to have a nice curve, you've now got kind of spike, spike, spike. And not only though, are people now in very distinct groups, but those groups are getting further and further away from each other. Yeah. So between poverty and middle class is now further and it's expanding, and between middle class and wealth is now expanding, and between wealth and ultra wealth is now expanding. Yeah. And so as these groups distance more and more from each other, you start getting in-group, out-group biases. And the net result of that is more otherization between groups. And we start to use awful language like supporting the poor rather than supporting the person that I know.
Yeah, and it's different because we tend to look at, it's something you call out. We tend to look at them as an isolated class. We tend to look at these people as, I've been reading a little bit about some of the caste systems, right, in India. And so you look at that kind of separation that automatically draws this kind of virtual boundary between people for no other reason than social class, than this artificial class or boundary of you don't have enough money, or you don't have enough, privilege, or you don't have enough stuff. Yeah. I think we've seen that kind of even in the social revolutions that have gone on this year, very apropos given, the murders that have happened. You have people that are agitating for change because they see such a distinct boundary that's artificial. There's no reason why these kind of classisms or these social classes should exist. Why are we repressing, BIPOC, or, to the, benefit of, loosely implied of, privileged white Americans, in some cases. Right. So I think it's that agitation, that struggle that you're calling out. It's no longer who we are together. It's who you are, who I am. And somehow we're going to get to some place that's better. I struggle with this a lot,
But I think the education system, all over the world definitely has a role to play in this, because, we're taught about science and maths and literature and all these things, but there's very few education systems in the world, at least within democracies. Weirdly enough, authoritarian states are very good at this, but within democratic or pseudo-democratic parts of the world, there's very few places that really teach you civics, right? Yeah. And by civics, I don't just mean, the study of civic history and the history of democracy, but I mean, how does a community work? How does voting work? How does politics work? What does it mean to be part of a community? Because it shows people, therefore, how to participate and how to protest and how to create change. But it also teaches you to spot what are the real reasons for an oppression, or what are the real reasons for something to be the way it is. And without civics education, you end up basically assigning everything to a particular bias, or you can assign everything to, the wrong cause. It's the kind of correlation versus cause fallacy that you see so much within everywhere, every industry.
Yeah, you end up tokenizing. Like, hey, Martin Luther King, awesome guy. He gave a speech. I had a dream. And then you leave it on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. You don't move it from there, because all you're doing is taking him and context of history, putting him there. You don't focus on what brought you to this change. And we have, I think, you brought it up, we teach a lot of the call hard sciences, math, science, and all this kind of things, but we don't focus around who we are. That's that civics aspect of we call them soft sciences, sociology, psychology, anthropology, but you don't realize that all that feeds this worldview. We tend to be very insular in America, right? As we have demonstrated pretty hardcore in the last 4 years. You know, not. I had somebody tell me the other day that America is a dumpster fire, and I had to start laughing because
Well, parts of it are. Parts of it are.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
I was in New York right at the beginning, just before lockdown. There was it's just another day, really. Oh, and then you travel more into the kind of Midwest and places, and you can feel it. But this is the thing, you know, when you're approaching philanthropy, you know, you've got to understand what is the real cause, and that means that you need to shut out sometimes the noise of social media and so on. So I'll give you one example. Equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome are two very, very different things, right?
Yeah.
Equality of opportunity means everyone gets the chance to have a seat at the table. Equality of outcome would mean everyone gets the same grade at the end of it. Mm-hmm. You kind of don't want that, but you do want everyone to have a seat at the table. So when you're creating a philanthropic intervention, so for example, if your aim is to get more people of color into the legislature to be able to make policy and make decisions, right? A lot of people think of that as an equality of outcome problem. The outcome being, well, we don't have enough people of color at the table in the Senate. But it isn't. It's an equality of opportunity problem because not enough people of color got into law a few years ago, meaning that they're not there now. Right? So the right thing for a philanthropist to do is, okay, let's fund more people of color to get into this area of study. But this is the nuance of creating solutions. You know, people are hurting. People are feeling a lot of pain right now for many reasons. But some of these problems will take a generation to fix because they weren't created overnight either.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that longitudinal problem. I had this when I worked in social services.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, I want to see this fixed tomorrow. You know, just because I got you housing credits for the day and I want this to be realized doesn't mean it's, you know, in a year from now, if you're asking for the same thing, it's disheartening because you don't see that change immediately, right? You don't see that kind of, you know, switch over, right? So it's
but it's also understanding what change you want. So I was in New York during the Occupy protests. Mm-hmm. And I remember actually, because I love to kind of interact with the protesters, and I was like, so what do you want? And they were like, we want these effing bankers to do this, and there was a lot of anger towards them. And I'm like, well, okay, well, what do you want as a solution? Well, that's not our problem. Government needs to sort it out. And I'm like, well, you can't. That's not how it works. Yeah. You know, you can't just, if you want change, you have to understand the problem and have an idea of what the solution is that you want. So, but this is again, civics and an understanding of community and an understanding of the dynamics of the different stakeholders in a community.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that, and I know we're running up on time. So, thought economics. Give me the 1 minute spiel of what thought economics is about. I know it's coming next year. Talk to me.
So thought economics started off as a hobby in 2007, where I just thought, I was getting annoyed by the fact that a lot of my favorite publications were switching more to kind of infographics and editorialized pieces rather than long form content. So I started interviewing people that I knew or I'd met. And then, I started to see, oh, wow, lots of people are kind of enjoying reading this. And I started just to reach out to people, and then before you know it, I'm on the phone to like Buzz Aldrin doing like an 1.5 hour long form interview with him, and then putting it as long form text and traffic builds. And then it's created this whole thing where thought economics is now a collection of interviews with the people that have shaped the century and the people that are shaping the next century. And so there's Nobel Prize winners and politicians and entrepreneurs and artists and some just really fascinating people. There's no subscription. Anyone can just go on and read it. And it's being turned into a book, which is due for international release in February. And in that book, it's, excerpts of my favorite interviews from that 12 years of speaking to these incredible people.
Well, even given this conversation, I know I'm going to be signing up for that. So I'm actually happy to add Fantastic. That to my, I got the shelves right up here. So August company that you will join, I suppose.
Amazing.
And I think I'll put you next to Gladwell because, Gladwell's pretty.
Well, that I am happy with. I can deal with that.
Yeah, good. Well, yeah, because I appreciate you taking the time on this random Tuesday morning, in mid or beginning of October. And, I appreciate the willingness to have a conversation about this stuff. And, when season 2, as I hinted at, season 2 will be about trust. I would love to have you back on, because I think trust
absolutely
works into all of these aspects of things that we've talked about even today. And by that time, maybe your book will be out and we can talk about that too. We can do a book
exactly.
review.
I'll have it somewhere kind of here, I guess. I'll replace this painting with like a giant cover image of the book.
Oh, you can just put your face there. That works too.
Maybe.
Yeah, hubris. It's all about hubris. Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for the conversation.
Wonderful.